I promised you some transgender news. So if you remember, not too long ago, it was a crime to say a man is a man or a woman is a woman. And the newest thing we have is children who are transgender need our protection. Show the Don Cheadle. This is Don Cheadle in SNL. Protect trans kids, presumably from Trump and transphobia. But here's the new thing, all right? I don't want to, no one should harm trans people or make fun of them or whatever, but when we talk about protecting trans kids, okay? One, we have to look at the studies, which we're not doing. Before this, it was about 66% to 90%, depending on the study you see, of kids who experience some sort of gender dysphoria grow out of it by the age of 18, which means they're just gay, right? There's kids who are gay, and we're now turning them into women, and lesbians we're turning into men. And a lot of feminists are speaking out about this. Now, I've talked about the certain problems that happens. So we have puberty blockers. This is now the recommended thing to do in Canada for physicians. You might know of a Ben Shapiro. You also might have heard that his wife is a doctor. I'm going to one-up you here for this anecdote, Ben Shapiro. My brother's a doctor, his wife is a doctor, her parents are doctors, and both my parents are doctors. Okay, the reason I bring this up is because we were having a family conversation. Really, really fantastic doctors, great medical people, but here's what people need to realize about doctors. Doctors don't know everything about medicine. They all usually have specific fields, like if you do, like my mom knows a lot about family practice and medical administration, and she has her strengths and she's really good at them. Then doctors rely on experts in other fields, and they usually go to conferences and do a good job about learning about other things, and this is how knowledge, and for the most part it's really, really good. The problem is there is a corruption in the trans studies field, where the experts in Canada, as I've been told by really well-meaning doctors, that the new literature says, hey, it's really traumatic for kids who experience gender dysphoria to go through puberty. Puberty is seen as a very dangerous trauma. So we have to then administer these drugs medically to avoid the trauma of puberty. I say, where the hell is this data coming from? We have no data. So for the longest time, or for a couple of years now, we've just been injecting kids with cross-sex hormones and puberty suppressors. This isn't unreversible, to sort of make them feel better, presumably. Now, this treatment has shown to have zero effect on the trans suicide rate. One thing. Two, we have to talk about puberty blockers. You might know there's a TLC like Jazz or whatever, like Jazz Hands or whatever. We're fine. She is a little boy with a penis who wants to be a woman, and she was given puberty blockers. Well, now she's stuck with a baby penis for the rest of her life, which means if Jazz wants to become a full transitioned woman, they can't even get the gender reassignment surgery because there's not enough material to, like, penises and vaginas come from the same genetic material, like, okay, we don't go into it, right? Everyone has a vagina, and then if you get certain hormones before birth, it becomes a penis. So you invert the penis, you make a vagina. That's why we can make vaginas, it's hard to make penises. If you have a child's penis, it means you can't make a vagina out of it. So this is going to be a person who's going to walk around with a little boy's penis for the rest of their lives. No sex life. Completely sterile because they want puberty blockers. That's just one thing. Two, there's a new study coming out. So it's been written about now. So here's a weird thing. I'm going to read you the abstract from this study. It's done the occurrence of acute cardiovascular events in transgender individuals receiving hormone therapy, results from a large cohort study. Now, apparently this study, people can't even get into it now because it's been blocked, probably due to social pressure. So here's the abstract, and then people actually have written an article on it already, so I'll read you some of the findings from there. In hypogonadal postmenopausal individuals, hormone therapy has been associated with increased risk of cardiovascular events. A steeply growing population that often receives androgynous hormones is transgender individuals. Although transgender individuals hypothetically have an increased risk of cardiovascular events, there is little known about the occurrence of cardiovascular events in this population. Therefore, we determined the incidences of acute spontaneous strokes, ischemic, hemorrhagic, transischemic strokes, or subnoid hemorrhage, myocardial infarcts, and venous thrombotic events is in trans women and trans men receiving transgender hormone therapy. Subsequently, we compared these instances with those reported in women and men for the general population. So what they did is they sort of followed transgender men and women, I believe from the 1970s to 2015. The study was about 3,870-something people. Let's see if I got it. So it's pretty large. 3,875 Dutch individuals from 1972 to 2015. So I'm just going to read you some of the findings here. The analysis showed that trans women, individuals assigned male sex at birth but with female gender identity who were receiving hormones as part of their transition, had more than twice as many strokes as women, 29 verse 12, and nearly twice as many strokes as men, 29 verse 16. There are 5 times as many deep vein clots among trans women, 73, than women, 13, and 4.5 times more than men, 73 verse 16. Heart attacks occurred at more than twice the rate among trans women, 30 than women, 13. Trans men, those assigned female sex at birth who had male gender identity receive hormones, had more than 3-fold elevation in heart attack risk compared with women, 11 verse 13. Essentially, pumping your child full of hormones can cause cardiovascular problems. That's just one of the things we know. So here's the danger, I say. We have a failure in society where what happens, by the way, it's actually Social Justice Day, so find that special someone that is important to you in your life and find something innocuous they said 10 years ago and just ruin that life. We have a social justice fatwa where any sort of reasonable research into this, like, hey, should we be giving young kids cross-sex hormones despite the increased risk about 2 to 3 times of heart attack, stroke, deep vein thrombosis, all these horrible diseases, just to make them feel better, even though we don't have any data on whether it will make them feel better. All right, here's the problem, right? We had no data going into any of this gender transition stuff, and we just did it blindly because feelings. Now the first preliminary data we're getting out there is pumping a bunch of hormones into your children might be dangerous. Who would have thought? I thought that a lot. So that's where we are, where when we talk about protect trans kids, when Don Cheadle gets up there and protect trans kids, he's a hero. Protect trans kids from their parents and society more like it. Or how about protect our gay and lesbian kids? Because it's not a genocide, but the left would call it a genocide if the right was doing this. There's a genocide going on against gay and lesbian kids. There's kids that are just lesbians or gay, and they're struggling with their identity because it's different from what their friends are going through. And we're telling them, oh, because you like this, you're a man. You're really a man. You're really a woman. Pumping them full of hormones, chopping off their genitals, and calling it social progress. It's dangerous. So who's protecting trans kids? Don Cheadle or me? Right? People might not like what I have to say here. It might not be comfortable to talk about that these trans and cross-sex therapies, they're not for kids. They're not for kids. It's child abuse. It's child abuse, straight up. There was no data about it, and you just cut off your kids' dicks and pump them full of hormones. Now there's data saying you're going to give them heart attacks doing it. It has no net benefits that we can see scientifically. But again, Republicans and conservatives hate science.